nothing's normal about this. Just stop. I mean, even just go a few years into the past and tell somebody what's going on. Okay, yeah, what we did in Venezuela, what's happening in Ukraine, and attack on Iran, and the tariff war against China, and now we're talking about taking Greenland, and they say, you're no, come on, you just that can't happen. But we're there. We start to think that this is somehow sort of normal. None of this is normal, even by very recent standards. This is all really very scary. This is the sort of thing that wasn't supposed to happen, and now we're there. It's happening.
Right, right. And I think everybody has a feeling that there is something afoot, something's wrong, and something's about to blow. I think many people deep down inside understand that things are not normal anymore.
Yeah.
Do you think something that could potentially be blow up into a much bigger situation for Trump and this administration would be this killing of Renee Goode by this ICE officer? Because like you said, many Americans, they don't care about foreign policy. They don't understand what's going on overseas. But when they see something at home, domestic issues have an impact. And this, I think, to me, feels like a George Floyd type of moment, what happened. And we'll see the fallout of this. And I think perhaps what is almost scarier than the shooting itself has been the response from the administration to immediately label this woman as a domestic terrorist, and Trump put out that crazy tweet saying how this woman violently ran over this ICE officer, and thank God he survived. And I don't know how he survived, but he did, and he was recovering in the hospital. Yeah, when we all saw the video, everybody saw it. Yeah. We know what happened. Yeah. It looked like an execution,
that's the way it looked to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's an outright cold-blooded execution. That's the way it looked to me.
Right. And just the optics of it are so bad, because the more that you dive into the story, it just starts to get worse. It's like when you hear, it's like, oh man, was it some, illegal immigrant that was trying to run away? It's not justifying the shooting, I think, but just trying to put it in context and be like, no, this was a 37.
Well, context is very important, and sometimes, you can look at a video and jump to conclusions, and you learn context, and your understanding of what was going on can change significantly. Let's say like this woman somehow had a history of violence against police officers, and it looked like she was reaching for a gun or something like that. But the more we learn, the more that actually, that we find that there's no excuse, and it's quite the reverse. At least that's what I've heard so far. It's angering a lot of people, and it's going to empower, I think, the left in this country. Is going to energize them. And, in this case, for good reason. I think they have very good reason to be angry about this.
I just hate that this is a left versus right thing. Yeah, that's one of the most disgusting things that I've seen with this.
Personally, look, I'll disagree with the left on immigration. I think any country has a right to protect its borders and to enforce immigration laws. Any country in the world, and most countries do, really quite forcefully, including countries like Mexico. They don't let Guatemalans into their country, and they guard their borders, and when they catch them, they send them back. And we have a right to do the same. We have, part of the problem is that we just ignored these. We had laws that were passed and they're just not enforced. And part of that is the left, but I'll be honest, I think most of it is conservative businessmen who've done very well. And now all this I want to emphasize, I'm not pointing the blame at those illegal immigrants themselves. I think the great majority are actually fine, hardworking people. We all have encounters with them. And they have kind of over time learned that these laws aren't very serious, and there are ways to circumvent them. And so this should just become a practice. And now there's this sudden crackdown. Okay. Now, but, we have a right. This is our country. We have our own laws, and we have a right to enforce them. So I'm not taking the extreme left-wing position, by any means. But even, if you believe in that, this kind of incident needs to be punished. You have to have agencies, enforcement agencies that actually, respect the law, are as humane as possible, respect, follow procedure. And when you have somebody do something like that, that person's got to be punished. That's terrible. That's wrong. And so I am really quite disgusted by the response from Vance and Kristi Noem and from Trump himself on this. They've
Yeah, the
all
whole
doubled down on it.
administration.
Right. It's just terrible.
I just don't understand why they would do that when we could see the video like in multiple angles in slow-mo, and we can see her before as well, you know, where she just dropped her kid off at school apparently, and then now she dropped somebody else off, and then she was, you know, you can hear her saying, like, waving heads like, you know, go ahead, kind of this politely directing the traffic. And these people these ICE agents are in unmarked vehicles, and they're wearing masks. It's just, that's scary for anybody. You know, if all of a sudden these people come out wearing masks out of unmarked vehicles, you're like, I'm going to go. And she's not flooring it. She's slowly turning and just like to leave.
And I've heard also that she got contradictory instructions. There was some, you know, somebody said stop and get out of the vehicle, and somebody else says go on, you know, on like the other side. And
right. And then you see video afterwards. There was a physician that was at the scene saying, like, let me check to see if there's a pulse. Let me go assist. And they say, no, everybody stand back. We have our own medics. They're like, well, where are they? They're not here.
Yeah.
You know,
it's horrible. It's horrifying. You look at that and say, there's something wrong here. You know, there's something wrong with this agency. You know, there's clearly, I'm looking at that and say, you know, you've got to stop this and get rid of all these bad apples. And there's something, you know, it suggests that it's not just, you know, one bad apple. There's something at the top, you know, that these people are being told, you know, if you, you know, feel threatened, shoot, or, you know, whatever, you know, don't worry about the laws, you know, we'll protect you. You get that sense. There's something wrong.
It's this crazy hyperpartisanship, you know, it's that now that the right's in power, they view the left as the enemy. They don't view them as American citizens, it seems like. And you know, it's just, I'm just shocked at the response of so many Americans. You know, it was the same thing like, you know, or Charlie Kirk, or maybe I should use Ashley Babbitt's probably a better example, but she wasn't as politicized, you know, to the extent that I think Charlie Kirk and this one is. But like, you know, when Charlie Kirk got killed, you know, it affected me. I saw it happen, you know, and I was just like, this is horrible. But then there's so many people in the left just saying like, this guy's just such an asshole. You're happy that he's dead. And then there's now I see this on the right where people see this woman get killed. It's like, she should have been following the laws. You know, this is what you get if you don't obey, you know, our law enforcement. And what's wrong with us? What is wrong with people?
Yeah, no, it is very disturbing. You're right. Yeah, maybe we are headed towards a civil war.
I feel like we are. Like, how can you dehumanize the other side so much that if you see this footage, that your initial response is try to make it, you know, justify the action, the killing of any of these people, Ashley Babbitt, Charlie Kirk, or, you know, Renee Goode here. It's just, it's sick. It's really sick. I just don't understand.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, whatever the political views of this person, it doesn't matter. You just don't do that, you know.
Right. And everybody just, it's really shocking to me, and it makes me worried about this country at a very deep, fundamental level. It makes me scared to think that if you don't express the right view, political view, then one group might view is just completely the enemy instead of a fellow American.
Right. Well, also, I think it reveals sort of the ugly underbelly of MAGA. You know, there's a lot, you know, there's a version of MAGA that I completely support, you know, in, you know, putting the country's interests first in a rational and a humane way. You know, it's all for our benefit and for the benefit of this country and for the benefit of the world if we just did that. Right. But then you see this celebration of violence against, you know, so-called enemies. And I think you're seeing it on the foreign policy front as well. One thing is to be remembered, like when Maduro and his wife were kidnapped, approximately 80 Venezuelans, or I shouldn't say Venezuelans, you know, 80 Venezuelans and Cubans. Apparently 32 of them were Cubans. But, you know, the majority of them were Venezuelans were killed. And, you know, nobody's concerned about that. It's just everybody's, you know, something in their chests. And
there's just this inability to empathize that we've lost that is terrifying me. Yeah. It's like these people, these 80 Venezuelans and Cubans that were killed, you know, many of them had families, had kids. You know, Renee Goode, she lost her husband 2 years ago, apparently. And now, you know, this kid, this 6-year-old boy is now an orphan. You know, it's like It's a tragedy. And then,
Yeah.
and I don't want to just focus here. I mean, it's all around the world. I just saw just through my feed horrific footage of a 10-year-old girl that was shot in Gaza, Israel, and had brain matter, blood. One of the worst things I ever saw. I hate that it just popped up on my feed. But it's like, how can you look at these things and not have empathy and understand?
Yeah.
Or in Ukraine,
right?
I saw.
Yeah, right. No, I agree. I mean, that's one of the things. It's just like to maintain, like if you've always been a supporter of Israel, I think at some point you're when you see these images and you're faced with a choice, either either say, no, this has got to stop. I can't support this. I'm not a Zionist anymore. This is just wrong because I see what it's doing and I cannot associate with this. Or you decide to just sort of shut something down in your own heart and say that, these are, okay, these people, in the end, you've made a decision within yourself that these people are not worthy of pity. They're not really human. And when you do that, then anything becomes
Then you're
possible.
a monster.
Yeah,
you're a monster.
right.
You're not a human yourself anymore once you do that.
Right. And I'm afraid that it's like that same kind of spirit has come home to America. I think of the last episode we were talking about, part of what motivated the neoconservatives, including many of the Gentile neoconservatives, is that they really kind of admired Israel because Israel didn't pay attention to these mamby-pamby laws, and they took the gloves off, and why can't we be that way? And I kind of see that that's where we are. It used to be, again, George W. Bush would actually criticize civilian casualties back in the early 2000s, caused by Israeli assassinations. Now we celebrate them. We celebrate, it's just something has changed, and it hasn't changed for the better.
No, it does feel like our government is acting more and more like the IDF. Maybe because Israel controls our government to some extent, perhaps. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, in part, but I mean, it's just also, it's because we made, again, I think you say, you can point your finger at the Zionists, but then you have to point the finger at us Americans. We just have to do that because we willingly went along with this and have become complicit in this. We could have said no at different times, and we didn't. And so now we are, in so many ways, as guilty as they are.
Yeah. I just hope that enough Americans can wake up, ditch this tribal politics, and realize and find some basic humanity again. And just realize that we're, us normal civilians, we're all getting screwed here, by the administration. This whole thing is scary, and this consolidation of power at the top, at the executive, it doesn't seem like the Constitution exists anymore. It doesn't feel like we live in a rule of laws. I'm increasingly feeling like, if I express the wrong views, then they can come after me. Yeah.
Well, we're not quite there yet, but we may be. I mean, we're seeing on both the right and the left, we're seeing signs of that. And I don't think that we should be at all, complacent. You say, well, I'm okay. But, eventually it's going to come home to haunt us all.
Okay, well, maybe we end it there, Dad.
Okay.
Unless there's anything else you want to add.
No, we can end it there.
All right. Well, I have a feeling this is going to something's going to happen. Things are moving fast now. I have a feeling something.
Right. I figured that 2026 was going to be crazier. That's the general trend. Every year is crazier than the one before. It's just but it seems to be accelerating. We're off to a really bad start this year.
It's nuts. Trump comes, Netanyahu shows up, and then Trump walks out and talks about his goal for his world peace, and then he immediately kidnaps the president of Venezuela, and now we have this seizing of these tankers, trying to assassinate Putin and Valdai.
Yeah.
Or
one thing I'd say, it's not clear that the Ukrainians or the Ukrainians with CIA support were trying to assassinate him. I still don't know if he was actually in that residence, and they may have known that he was not, but it would have been more of a symbolic attack. But still, I mean, it's just like attacking the White House, or not, maybe not quite the White House, but
Mar-a-Lago.
Mar-a-Lago when Trump wasn't there, exactly. But that is a huge escalation, and it's you know how we would have responded to that. So this Oreshnik response, I think, is actually very measured.
Okay, Dad. Scary times.